Hi friends, and welcome to my weekly live stream about the Uno platform. My name is Jérôme Laban. I'm the CTO of the Uno platform project, which is an open source project. You can find us on GitHub. And I spend about an hour every week taking a look at issues that we have in Uno, discussing issues, features that we've added, or talking about the news and answering questions if there are any. I see that Jose Silva is already here. And Ozzy has a question. So that's the that's the good thing about being live. So I'll talk about your questions just right after Josie. So if you take a look at the blog that we have on Uno platform, there were a new article that we released about the LightDB support for .NET developers, with WebAssembly. So it's another type of NoSQL database that you can use in your browser. Same thing as the SQLite support. So another type of library that you can get to store your data inside of your web app. Another thing that we had recently is the addition of .NET Native AOT. It's something that's in preview in the latest Uno platform preview bits, and it's the ability for Skia GTK applications to be natively compiled to the platform. So let's say you want to build something specifically for Windows x86 or x84 or Linux or macOS or what is provided by .NET. You're going to get faster performance and close to zero startup time, which is pretty good when developing applications and running applications like this. I've seen posts on Mastodon talking about people on cloud services that were having very, very low startup time for their web services, or server workers or things like that. That were using that feature that's been provided by .NET 7. And that is pretty good. So interestingly, the people that are developing, the engineers that are developing that feature specifically on the .NET framework were helpful in providing that documentation and how to build it, and specifically how to set the what are called the trimmer root assemblies. So there are a few things with GTK and GDK that are needed for everything to work properly. But that's all taken care of when you include all those and follow the documentation here. Interestingly, it provides, so it makes for a, I wouldn't say zero, it's not single file publishing, but it's mostly one file. So all the assets and everything like that is still outside of the executable, but most of the content is there. So that makes for not a smaller app because it's a compiled app, so it's actually larger, but it's pretty darn fast. So take a look if you're interested in .NET Native AOT support. That will be interesting to get your feedback. So last week we took a look at a specific issue that we had. I think I still have it somewhere. Let me just copy and paste the link. I have it around. I thought I had it somewhere in there. Yeah, it's the memory leak issue that we have here. So the memory issue that we had was the fact that ListView was indicated as leaking memory in WebAssembly. And we got to a point where we actually have shown that there actually is a memory leak, but also that it is also something that is available, that it's a memory leak that also happens to be on GTK. So what we're going to do is, and that's something that we had last week, the idea is that the sample is built using the sample is built using the WinUI API set. You can see here that it's the WinUI API. So what the issue that we had last time was the fact that we have in Uno a branch that is automatically converted to be WinUI compatible. So Uno is split in two. It defines a set of packages that use the UWP API set, and another one that defines the UWP API set, and for now the source code inside of Uno is UWP based, and we're going to switch at some point to WinUI. But when you use your packages, the CI and the Uno side is basically taking the UWP API set and converting it to WinUI. That means that when you take the sources from the repo, they're UWP, and if you want to debug something that's on WinUI, then you have to convert the tree. So to avoid having that conversion to be done every time, we have a branch that's called generated master and WinUI autoconvert, and that is a branch that is automatically converted from the tree that you see here to WinUI. So what we're doing is when we want to debug all of this, we're going to be overriding the packages that are here, and let's move to the latest packages that we have so that we debug the same thing. So let's go to not that one, the public one. So we're going to be moving and upgrading to the latest packages for Uno. It looks like we're already on latest. No, not on latest because we're not in pre-release. So there we are in pre-release. And I'm going to get to your question, Jose, just a few seconds, just we get the build starting. And we have a few upgrades to make. So let's upgrade to all those packages to the latest. And we're going to be able to upgrade to the latest. So we have, I don't know if we upgraded for GTK. Yeah, there you go. So it upgrades to 47330. So we're going to take that version and we're going to change that version. So we can see here that the branch for my solution here is already on WinUI autoconvert. Though what I'm going to do is make sure that I'm using the latest of that branch. So to do this, I'm just going to reset the branch to the latest commit that was available here. So we can see here that it was done this morning here in Montreal. So I'm going to reset to that commit. So it's going to take the latest sources that we have for all of this. So now we can reopen the solution and go to change that version. So here we have the cross-targeting override props file, which is a file that allows to select which version of which target framework we want to debug. So we're going to go for Net 7 because that's easier with more features. And then we're going to open the Skia solution filter here because that's the one we want to debug. So, and once it's opened, we're going to compile everything and then go to the questions. So I see there's a few new people that join. Welcome. We're going to try to debug a memory leak here today with the GTK head that we have already. Okay, so we have the project here that's available. So we upgraded all of it. So now we can just compile the GTK sample app. It's going to compile all the packages that are needed specifically to override inside of another app. So while it builds, and just to be sure that it actually builds, because sometimes Visual Studio is doing some weird things. Well, 11 gigabytes. That's pretty large. I'm not too sure if it's that specific Visual Studio. Maybe. Yeah, it looks like it's not it's taking a bit of time. So let's close that instance. I think it's the instance that I had opened last week. So it's still pretty large. So let's open a new one. Let's open a new one and let's go for our latest build of the preview bits of Visual Studio. Which is it? Yes, preview 5. There we go. So let's open it again and let's actually build this time. So we're trying to get the solution to be a bit smaller in some cases. And one thing that's going to help is removing the Xamarin targets. We have quite a few of them. So those are going to be, it's probably during the next year or so, once we get everything in order with .NET 7, which is already pretty good, but there are a few things that are still not running, and we're waiting for the service release 1 that is going to be available for .NET 7. That will fix a few things for Android. So let's see. Does it build this time? It should be. So it's, yeah, it's doing something. Okay. Okay, that's good enough. Okay, so let's go to your questions. Wow, quite a few questions today. Hey, thanks for joining, BuildCalc. The MizardX is here as well. Okay, so the question was, what are the differences between custom renderers and renderers? There are no such things as custom renderers and renderers in Uno. There's only controls, custom controls, and user controls, and templating, and things like that. You can have an example of control templating if you want. We have one here in Uno samples. You can see here the Uno samples repository. And there is one here that is called control library. And you can see an example of templated control. So it's an empty control that has a template here. And then the rendering here is done that way. And then the displaying is done that way. And then you have the control template with its own content that's displayed that way. So if you want to change the template of a control, you can set a new style with a new control template inside, which can be completely different if you want. And then you can have a new control based on the same code. So it's called the lookless controls. So you're creating a control like this, and then you can template it the way you want, and be it per platform, for instance. I see. So another question from Jose. Does Uno use standard class library or shared project? What are the pros and cons? Okay, so it's a big discussion, shared projects, and why we do still use shared projects. And one of the reasons we are still using shared project, even though we don't like them, to be very clear on that, it's because there's no way at this point to share code between projects and have good build performance at the same time. So what I mean by this is that you can create another library if you want. That is, let's say you could take all the code that's in here and put maybe except the app.xaml, but take the code from what's inside the share project and put it inside a library that cross targets everything to another to let's say Net 6 iOS, Net 6 Android, and everything else. But the problem is that if you're referencing that assembly from, let's say, the GTK head, what will happen is that you will compile all the other targets for pretty much nothing. And that's a missing feature in Visual Studio at this time, which basically wastes you time. That's pretty much what it is. So in the to make sure that we are not spending too much time building or have a good experience for developing, for now, we're using shared projects until Visual Studio ends up being implementing that feature, which is when you compile a specific target framework here, all the chain of dependencies that go below will be compiled for only what you needed. So you can do a library if you want. It's not going to be a standard class library either, because it's going to be a cross-targeted library. You can do it if you want, but know that you're going to be spending a bit more time building if you want, if you're using that. So that's one of the thing. So there you go. There's that. I see Cal is helping. Thank you, Cal, for solution filters. So yeah, it's a way for us to make smaller loading projects, solutions. So kind of a workaround, because we have a lot of projects inside of a solution. We have 158 projects in the Uno UI solution, but only for building Skia, we only need 52. So that's one way to be faster and have Visual Studio load things faster. So there's that. And was there another question? Renderers is a Xamarin Forms MAUI construct. Exactly. So it's not something that we use because we in Uno, we render the content directly in the visual tree. There's no There's no partial tree or virtual tree that needs to be rendered. It's the actual tree that's available there for iOS and Android specifically. Okay, so we've built. So another question, is it possible to use dynamic resources along static resources? So dynamic resources is not something that WinUI supports. And I'm curious, why do you need dynamic resources specifically? Is it to be able to update something, I mean, dynamically in the WPF sense, or is it something else that you need? Because in many cases, if it's for external resources, you can use, there's another way to do it using markup extensions. You can make a custom markup extensions that will do something like this. But if you want to update something dynamically, just use Xbind. Xbind really is done for that. It's you can hook onto something that comes from somewhere that's iNotify property changeable, so you can update it that way. So that's it. Well, styles and controls. Well, Xbind and bindings are exactly what this is. You don't necessarily need to update a resources that comes from nowhere and update it to something else. So you can use Xbind to do that specifically. Okay, so I have updated the sources here. So now we're going to be reproducing our issue that we had last week. So we're talking about this sample app that the person that created the issue had created. And we're going to be taking a look at what the behavior is. And then we're going to drill into a few other things. And the question from Jose is, what is Xbind? And there's actually quite a bit of documentation that's available as part of Uno. And it really is about compile bindings, indeed. And you can find all the supported examples here of Xbinds, like string formats and method calls and events and bindback and typecasting, pathless casting. You can even do Xload binding and things like that. So take a look at all those features, and you have the original documentation that is available here as well to talk about what the Xbind markup extension is all about. Okay, so let's take this out. So we had our memory leak here. So if I add a few elements, I can see that the delegate is executed. I don't need that part. So I can see that if I add things in a memory, so interestingly, the actual use of the app is just that low, but it's interesting. And then we remove items, and with GC, we can see that the memory is not going down. So that means that the memory is held by something. So now that we're running in GTK, that means that we can go and use the performance profiler that comes with Visual Studio. So Bill Kalk is saying, happy to see Uno has put together some Xbind documentation, which looks like a better quick ref than source doc from Microsoft. That's fair. It's mostly about us saying we support this, and something that may not be supported yet. There's some pieces that are not supported yet in Xbind for Uno, but yeah, because the documentation explains all about what Xbind does, but we're talking about what we're supporting from Xbind. So that's both are needed in that case. So we're going to take a look at the object allocation tracking. I would say, what do we have? Memory usage. Let's go for memory usage instead of all this. So let's go and start the app, and we're going to try to see what we can do with all this. So let's do some few additions. Take a snapshot. We can see the memory has gone up quite a bit. Then we'll remove the items. I'm going to do some GC. Take a snapshot again, and we can close the app afterwards. And now we're going to go and see where that the memory is held. Okay, fail to load the warehouse. So that's the kind of things that happens sometimes. The tooling is sometimes behaving. So let's see if we can remove. I think we reload the diagnostic session. Sometimes it works. No, it does not work. So let's try it again. Maybe this time it will work. Otherwise, we can try with the stable version of Visual Studio. Maybe it will work this time. So Azarius is saying, imagine I have a set of global styles nav that XAML and buttons and other controls, and based on a response from an API, I want to override that. Yes, you definitely can, and that's what you can do with the binding. So let me give you an example of all this, and I think we have just a sample for that. That was about changing. It's somehow related, but it will give you an idea. So we have native style switch. So this sample is all about switching styles from native styles to custom styles. So what we're doing here is we have the styles here. No, it's only for Xamarin because Windows does not support native styles, but you're going to get the idea. And what we're doing is we're data binding the style to is checked, which is a checkbox that we have here. And so that native element here, that native checkbox here. And then we're binding the button switch converter to the button style. So what happens here is that if we're on WinUI, then we're using that style. And if we're on native button, we're going to be using that style. So in here, that sample is all about switching between the native style for a button that we define inside of Uno to the XAML default button that's defined in UWP. And you can switch between the two just by changing the checkbox. And the reason it changes is that the style that is provided through the binding is done that way specifically. So you can switch between the two. So if you're talking about doing something with styling that comes from an API or whatever, that's definitely possible using a binding or an XBind. You can convert the data that comes in and change the style of the control completely. Now, it's generally not something that's done that way. Sometimes if you want to change something, it's rare that you want to change the style of a control completely, but sometimes it's just about some portion of the code that of the UI that you may change. And that's where creating a user control that has dependency properties and you change the behavior of your UI for colors and things like that. That way you'll fine grain and not just a big bang of changing the whole style of the control. So there's multiple ways to do this. Okay, so let's see. I was talking, but probably here there's going to be too much, but let's say I do that again. Oh, I forgot. Let's try again. I wonder if I should have stopped the collection because sometimes it's caused by this. No, this time it worked, see? So I'm going to try again. So let's try this with the performance provider. So I'm gonna try stopping the application from the diagnostics here and not stopping the app here. So maybe that's the reason for this. Okay, so I take a snapshot from the beginning. I add a few items. Take a snapshot at the top. Then remove the items. Do a few GCs. Take a snapshot again, and then stop the collection. Let's see if it works. No, still not working. So I wonder if it's related to the use of snapshots. So let's go and take a look at the, oh, not that. I'm gonna try with the stable build of Visual Studio. Maybe it's that. Sometimes it happens. Open solution, better that way. Okay, so let's see if we can get a profile running this time. So I have memory usage that's selected. Oh, I don't know if you noticed, but the layout is different. So that means that there was a new option that was available as part of the profiler, but that's not of interest yet. So let's go and try to figure out what is next. So take a snapshot again. Oh, okay. Adding items. Let's do a GC, which doesn't change anything, which is expected. Now let's remove items. Let's do a GC again. Let's take a snapshot and stop the collection. Will it work this time? Let's hope so. No, still not working. Okay, so that's a problem. So what we could do is maybe not take a snapshot. I'm gonna try to see if we're not taking a snapshot. Oh, that's too bad. So if it doesn't work, we're gonna try it another way. Maybe there's a way to change something here. Maybe native heap collection. Okay, so maybe we can just not collect the native heap. Maybe that's that. Okay, let's try with no native interop. Maybe native heap. Maybe it'll help. Maybe it will help. Okay, so I do this. Take a snapshot. GC. Remove. GC again. Snapshot, and then stop. Let's see what happens. Still not working. Okay, so that's not particularly good. Let's try one more time, see if there's something else that we can do. Otherwise, we're going to do another one. There's the .NET allocation tracking. Maybe that one will help. I'm just going to see if there's a way to get something. Let's see if I do this with I stop without snapshot. No, I need a snapshot, so maybe I can do just one, maybe. Let's see. Just one at the end. Okay, I do add, remove, clear, and do one snapshot. Maybe I'll get lucky there. Oh, I got lucky. Okay, so if I make more than one, okay, so it's better than nothing. So Jose is asking which map control is used in Uno. At this point, I think there's only one map control, and it's the native one, which is the Google one on Google on Android devices, and the Apple one on iOS devices. Okay, so we have a heap def size here, and we're going to find our list view items. And we can see that the allocated size for those is big, which is expected. Now we're going to try to find what is holding onto it. And we know that we have a notion of, so there's the pooling feature that is here. So we have disabled that. So last time we tried and the pooling was disabled. So the pooling here is all about keeping in memory instances that we're generating for the UI so that when we recreate the same UI, we don't spend time just recreating the same content. So we just give you the same content over and over. It's faster and more interesting. Now, sometimes it can cause issues, but it looks like it's not the case here. So let's see what we have here. So we have the property details. We have my control here. So path to root. A property change callback, that's here. So that one is a cycle. The dependency object store. There's a dependency object store here. I don't know if it gives no, it doesn't give anything. So so we have a few things here. Dependency object store. So we have a loop. Oh, we have a dependency object store here. We have a cycle. Okay. But by the looks of it, we're holding on to it from my control. Stored in a list of materializable item. Okay, so we can see that there's a content presenter that holds onto a materializable list. which is fine. This grid. See UI element stored in a grid also. We can see list view item. Okay, so it's stored in list view item again. And then stored in a list of list view items in the item stack panel. So that is curious. So the item stack panel is holding instances to that control in the materializable list, even though the list is empty. So that's a bit of a problem. So maybe we have an implementation detail here that is causing issues here. Item stack panel, and we can see it's held by list view, which is fine. Okay, so we have one item stack panel that's holding onto 5 line items. 5 line items, or is it? Yeah, and so we have a double-ended queue. So it's held into a materializable list as well as a double-ended queue. So we're back to where we were with the materialization stuff. So what I saw last time is that the double-ended queue implementation that we have here may be wrong. So let's go and see what we have here with the double-ended queue. So I see another question. Oh, Mr. Olivier, ça fait longtemps. Welcome. Azarias is asking, I've been creating games with the Uno platform recently, primary and WebAssembly. With PWAs and WASM, can I reach all OSs with WASM? Would you say that instead of creating native apps per platform, would you recommend focusing on WebAssembly only? Well, it depends on your audience. It depends on the type of apps that you're making. So games is interesting. And actually, Olivier is one of the guys that may be of large interest to that kind of things. But WebAssembly and memory consumption is a problem, mostly because there's and there are threads that are already there. If you search for, I think it's if you search for GitHub WebAssembly, there's going to be something like memory management, I think, if we search for that. Come on. Where did I click? Yeah. Nope, not that one. Okay, so we're going to go directly to this because someone is piggybacking. So if we search for, I don't know if it's WebAssembly. So let's search for memory. I think it's memory management. There was a large discussion on that specifically. WASM needs a better memory management story. So if you look throughout this specific issue, you'll see that the memory management on different platforms is very different. Sometimes it's pretty broken on Android specifically. So it depends on what you're trying to do. So I would say try it and see what you get out of it. It may be just fine for the type of games that you're doing. If you're conservative in memory management, probably will be fine. But if you're allocating way too much, then it may start to become a problem. There's also the fact that there's only one thread. So at this point, so you could start using the multi-threaded WebAssembly features that we added in Uno recently. That may help to get more performance out of your game. So it all depends on your scenario, and try what's best. The good thing about doing some WebAssembly stuff is that you go completely out of the stores, but the bad thing is that you go out of the stores. So good thing is out of the store you can deploy whatever you want. No one's gonna bother you with what you put in it. But the bad thing is that if you don't go for the stores, then you may have less visibility. So you're gonna have to find your visibility your way. Porting my whole C++ gist library to mscripten. You have to pre-allocate the heap that you're going to use. There's no virtual memory. No, there isn't. You have to know what your, yeah, definitely. You have to know what your budget is. It's yeah, memory management in WebAssembly is tricky, very tricky. So if you have a GC and yeah, well, in C Sharp, that's fine. You can allocate and deallocate in a sense. It's just but no, it's you're gonna have to do it by yourself, unfortunately, if you're going out of that way. Okay, so let's go back to our double-ended queue that we have here. And I think the implementation that we have here is wrong for some reason. And what I saw last time is that when we remove things from the double-ended queue, it's not removing the content for some reason. So I'm going to try to figure if there's something else. So you can see here that clear is pretty much doing nothing. I don't know if count is doing anything. It doesn't do anything. So that's quite a big problem, because that means that the if items are removed from the double-ended queue, they're going to stay allocated in that double-ended queue, and we're going to leak. So so that's not particularly good. So Jose is asking, what is the meaning of a cycle detected? Okay, so if we go back to Visual Studio here, when it says cycle detected, it means that that reference is somewhere else in the tree, and that it's basically two objects that are referencing each other, or the same object that's referenced from itself by a chain of other references. So what that means generally is that the garbage collector is detecting this and will clear the memory anyway. So it's clever enough to do that kind of detection. But it can also be a problem if you're doing some iOS or Android, particularly with Mono, where if there's a cycle and there's native memory, and then it may cause a problem. So so it's a circular dependency in a sense, but not necessarily, because it's just that happens that the references or the objects are referencing each other through others most of the time. So if you're doing Skia and others, it's not a problem. If you're doing iOS, Android, it may be a problem. Okay, so our double-ended queue is wrong, completely wrong. I don't know where that implementation comes from, but it's not good. It's not good at all. I wonder if we need to do a few things around this. So let's search for remove, for instance. When we do remove range, what are we doing in remove range? Or remove, just plain remove. So if we do, is there just a remove, do remove from back? Okay, so removing that way is doing the right thing. So removing from back is clearing the content, which is fine. Now the thing is that if we're obviously manipulating that double-ended queue the wrong way, and when we're removing items from the lines, the thing is that we're manipulating lines. So maybe the issue is different. So let's go just write back the remove. So the command that we have in here, I think, in the view model. So when we remove items, I think we do have a command somewhere that will do removal. So we're going to try to dig into that one. So let's say remove item. So remove item is doing remove. So we're just going to dig into that one with the debugger and see where we go with this part. Okay, so if I add a few items, and then come on, debugger. I thought I disabled that part. Maybe I didn't. Probably because I'm using the different version of Visual Studio. So there's a feature in the debugger that downloads symbols from NuGet, but for some reason it's not there, but it's still doing something around it. That's curious. Web exceptions that shouldn't be there. Okay, so I have an add, then I do remove. Where do I go? Okay, so in remove here, it doesn't work because we're going through just my code. I don't know if we have it here. Maybe. No, just my code is not enabled. So, okay, so we need to go inside of the list view completely. So to do this, we're going to go into list view. I think it's list view, probably list view, just list view base, most probably. Okay, so we have list view base, and we're going to go to the handling of items changing. So we have, let's see. See if we search for iCollection, iNotify collection. Notify collection changed, so it's not in that one. Probably have it somewhere else. Drag and drop. Managed. No, not that one. Okay, so let's search a bit larger. So we have item source view, not the one that I want. Items control. We have list view base, not the legacy one. Okay, so we're probably doing it just in items control somewhere. Okay, so let's see if we put a breakpoint for this one. Okay, so we have items control, line 70, 975. If we put a breakpoint somewhere, no, we like 795. Okay, so let's see if our collection change is doing something. Oh no, I'm building the wrong project. Okay, so let's continue. Okay, so if I remove this one, no, not the right one. So probably not doing the right thing here. So is there a notify collection change somewhere else? I got a repeater, item source. So if it's not this one, I would have thought that would be in the list view, but it's not there either. Virtualizing panel, not here. Picker, collection view. So it could be that we wrapped it into something else. Okay, so I see there's a lot of discussion here when I was searching. Okay, so wasn't performance relatively better? Question limited power draw on processor, really good. Power envelope, yeah, that's true. Compiling .NET to WASM, definitely possible. Garbage collector running on WASM. It's definitely possible as well. And if you can, we definitely can compile WebAssembly to WASM. That was the sample that I shown last week, which was the ray tracer benchmark sample. So that is actually running on that can run on Android devices and iOS devices, if I'm not mistaken. And this is compiled with AOT. So this is .NET IL compiled down to WebAssembly, and it's running threaded. So if you take this and run it on your phone, that should be working, given that it's relatively recent or uses a recent version of Chrome. That should be working fine. And do you need the whole IL going on WASM as well? No, actually not necessarily. So the interesting thing with .NET is that there's a mixed mode. And there's so there parts of it can be optimized down to WebAssembly specifically and using SIMD if possible. But there's also a way to get an interpreter. So parts of what's not running as or not generally not running completely. So let's say when I click on that button, for instance, I have not recorded a profile out of it, and that part is going to run using an interpreter. So it takes the IL and uses an interpreter machine, virtual machine that runs the same code as the AOT, but without AOTing it. And the cool thing is about .NET, and that's something that's coming up in .NET 8, and that they're going to be introducing a edge interpreter. And it's going to be using JITting to WebAssembly using a smaller known feature of WebAssembly that kind of takes the IL and makes WebAssembly out of it, or more optimized than just interpreting. So question is, but then they need to box data so they can exchange between interpreter and WASM code. Not really, no. It's just plain memory. It's just, I mean, .NET is manipulating a flat memory on the other targets as well, and so there's no boxing of any kind. The interpreter is just working on the same data that the actual AOT code for ngend or anything else that runs. So it's pretty much the same thing. Right? There's no wrapping of data or of any kind. The only thing is that the interpreter is slower because it's interpreting code, but that's pretty much it. So there's that. Okay, so I was stuck in there. I'm missing a few things with the way we do list views. It is an emulator. An interpreter is an emulator for sure. It's an emulator for an IL based IL based stack machine VM. So yeah, definitely. In the same way that WebAssembly is an emulator for is kind of the original versions or the security trimmed down versions of WebAssembly are emulators for actual WebAssembly code. So let's say if you run an iOS device in lockdown mode, what happens is that they were going to be using a WebAssembly interpreter for the same way that they do for JavaScript. So it's a no JIT for JavaScript. It's going to be slow, but it's going to be secure, or more secure than nothing. So the fun part of it, it's kind of an emulator on top of an emulator. Yes, for sure. I mean, if you're on the CISC, you're definitely going to have an emulator of smaller instructions there. That's going to be fun. Let's say in a few years now, if someone tries to emulate another machine that's on top of WebAssembly, that's going to be fun. Well, the story of computing. So now the problem here is that I don't see anything that was there. So maybe I'm not looking at the right change. So maybe it's collection change that I was not looking at correctly. So let's see. I have an observed collection change. So maybe it's that one. So maybe I can change that. So you tried interpreter and AOT and performance increased, but so did the size. The interpreter mode leads 26 megabytes mixed mode and 88 megabytes in AOT. So that's true, but that's because you're using the non-profile version of the AOT. And that's the thing. So if you want to do some performance improvements or strike a balance between the two, and that's the thing. So if you take a look at the sample that I've just shown here, it's supposed to not be that big because it's mixed. And if I take a look at the size here, and we're working on that, we're going to get those down. We can see that the size is 9.6 megabytes with threading included. So it's still big. It's something that we're working to get down because reasons, and it's something that we're trying to fix. But if you enable mix mode, it definitely does compress well. You can see that 41 down to 9.6, pretty well compressed. But still, it still is things that the WebAssembly runtime needs to load and parse and things. So it's better if it's not compressed at all. So better if it's not there completely. So for WebAssembly, if you want to do profiled AOT, you can go to the documentation. Actually, let's go for the UNO documentation. It's probably going to be better. Do I have it here? No, I don't. If you go to the Bootstrapper documentation here, or no, tooling, bootstrapper. And then if you search for runtime execution modes, there's profile guided AOT. And what it will do is that you build an application using a special mode where you run your application once. It will allow you to get a profile of what's been executed when you use the app. So use the app as much as you can so that it compiles most of it. It detects most of it. And then on the second pass, you take that profile, give it to the compiler, and what it will do is that it will compile only what you actually used, and not what everything, and what not what was detected as used by the compiler originally. So it will basically trim down your app by half, depending on what you're doing. Could be more, depending on what you're doing. So take a look at what we're doing here. So you're saying C++ to WASM was 11 megs without, wow, that's a very large library, 11 megs of WASM. That's yeah, but that's a lot of code. How many lines of code in C++ you have behind this? Because it has to be massive. So to generate the profile, you had to install. I'm sure you don't want to know, but at least to compile, which is good. So having a large C++ library compiled down to WebAssembly with all the tricks that you have to do to get there, that's very cool. So you have so generate the profile, and you had to install a lot of things on the machine. So that maybe well, so to get there, you have to install something that allows ImScripten to run. And to get that to run, you have to have Python, you have to have Git, you have to have Ninja, a few other things that need to be there. So yeah, there's a bit of dependencies that need to be added, but that's pretty much what you need to get there. So you cannot have it all. You have to. It's the same with .NET. There's a little bit less dependencies that need to be there, but it's something that you're gonna have to compile. Now I'm also interested, Olivier. Is it a public library that you're compiling to C++, or because if it's something that is public, maybe we can use it with Uno somehow. That's too bad. Okay, then maybe there's some kind of collaboration that we can do depending on the target that you get into. Okay, I see. Okay. So if I go back to the source changing, so we can see here that I was instead of the item source changed, and I'm observing collection changed. If it wants to, is it? So ready to run contains IL native plus native, and native AOT only contains native code. That's correct. That's correct. Though native AOT has its own set of tricks, specifically around the fact that sometimes anything that has to do with generics and complex generics, like for instance, I've been using native AOT for a very long time when it was in UWP. And if you create and bear with me, it's going to be a rough one. If you're creating a generic virtual method that has generic parameters, you're going to have a bad time. And that's the kind of things that blows up the whole thing, because it takes a lot of memory, and sometimes just does not generate anything. So maybe they've changed the techniques to generate something that looks better, but sometimes it was hard. Can we use ready to run with WASM? So that's called not really. That technique doesn't exist. There's nothing about that. So I have another one. So collection changed. Okay, so unwrap source. So supporting Uno on Unreal Engine using frame buffers. Well, Uno works on frame buffers already for Linux, but could be on any kind of frame buffer. So if you go to same thing, we have frame buffer. So that's for Linux for now. Now it's but it's something that's definitely possible to render some content there. So we could now for rendering on the Linux frame buffer specifically, but we can render on something else, given that the the inputs and outputs are mapped properly. So I have the collection changed. So if I do this, I have okay, that's interesting. Try observe collection view source. Yes, that's true. That's true. We definitely have to. And yeah, see you next time. It was very nice. Thank you, and have a good sleep. So we have selector here that we don't need. Item source change, for some reason it's not picking it up. Okay, so we're probably gonna have to do something else there. It looks like so the observe collection change should have done something, but for some reason it's not picking it up. So it's doing unwrapping of item sources here. It's not observing anything. We have observe collection change. Oh wow, that's that's early or late. And knowing you, I think it's late. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was Olivier. So yeah, so as I said, it's pretty early in the morning or late. Okay, so we have this one. Okay, so let's try again to see which one we're using because I'm not too sure. I don't know where that is coming from. It's loading symbols very slowly. It's not supposed to. Okay, so none of them are used here for some reason. So maybe I need to look somewhere else. So if it's not in this view here, maybe it's in managed. So I thought maybe we can take a look at the way we're doing removal of items inside of the panel that we had. So the one that's actually referencing the double-ended queue. So let's go the reverse way if you don't know where all of this is going. So double-ended queue is used in virtualizing panel layout. So we're going to try to look for removal of that of items in that specific session. So yeah, sure, of course, showing you a space router, of course, it's super fun to see people doing development around Uno, and yeah, it's amazing. It's very nice to see that you're able to do all those games on WebAssembly. I think for people that are watching, I think we had I don't know if we had an article about this recently. I don't know if I remember. I think we had that, or it was a tweet. But feel free. I don't know if you can paste URLs here, but I think we had that somewhere. Ah, space shooter. There it is. Okay, that's your space shooter. So I'm gonna paste the link in the chat. There you go. That's very cool. Okay, so now we're going backwards and try to find where we're manipulating the list. So I missed that one. So yeah, materialize line. So we're in the virtual panel layout, and we're searching for materialized lines, and then we're going to try to find the location where we're removing content. So this is fill layout, unfill layout. So it could be something like this. Okay, so it's something else. So maybe let's see if I get something. Okay, so I have this one that I don't need. This breakpoint, and I should be able to break into the other ones to find where we're actually removing content. So are we going to be able to see if we're removing the right things or not? Oh, you're going to be able at some point. It's not that difficult. It's just about it's knowing stuff up, knowing code, walking around the code. So you can see that I'm not too familiar with that part of the code, with the virtualizing panel layout. It's not I was not the right running it. So I'm trying to get to the point where I can actually do something about it. So let's remove stuff. Okay, so I got to remove here. And a remove didn't do anything in the removing here. So it's probably not that one. So let's find another one. Correct for estimation error, not that one. Clear lines, not that one either. Scrap layout, no. We have a clear here. Add to front, add to back, not that one. Complete reordering. I wonder, it looks like we're not doing anything. So we're not removing anything. It may be the cause of all this, because we're not removing content from the list. I wonder. Let's see. Capacity. Oh, so we have access to capacity. So let's take a look at what the capacity is. So we have capacity of 8, count is 0. What's inside the buffer? Okay, we have one line. And it has content in it, which is not good. Okay, so we can see here that our count is 0 and our buffer has one item. And it's supposed to be cleared completely. So that means that we actually did miss something here for adding items. And so the thing is that the clear here is supposed to be doing something. So I wonder if I remove the content here. Okay, so it's doing clear. Okay, scrap layout is doing that. Okay, so that makes sense. So now we have a materialized line that's calling clear. And the clear is about the double-ended queue, which does not clear anything inside of the double-ended queue. So let's go and fix that one explicitly. So if we go in the clear, so the double-ended queue that we had before, why do I don't see the clear? Okay, there we go. Clear. So this is not good, of course. So what we need to do is probably fill out the content of the internal array. Is that what we have? Yeah, I think it's called buffer. Buffer, there we go. And is it an array? I think it is an array. It is an array. Okay, so we can probably use something like this. No, assert. Array of T. Is there a way to do clear? There you go. Clears the content of an array. That should be enough. Let's try it that way. Let's do rebuild and see where we can go. So I don't know. So compiling, yeah. So compiling is, you don't necessarily need that large of memory. So I think this machine is 32 gigs of RAM. Oh, no, it's 64. But I have many things opened, so multiple things opened. So you may not need to have that much. And it's something that we're trying to get to work with. Roslyn's taking a lot of memory, and we don't know yet why. So it's not necessarily because of what we're doing that makes it fail, but yeah, something that we need to take a look at at some point to get there. Okay, so array going to be used with type arguments. Okay, so it's not clear that way. Does it do clear? Can I do clear directly? Maybe. Oh, clear. Okay, there you go. That's better. It's mostly about, we've been doing source generators for a while, and with any type of source generator, it kind of blows up for no apparent reason. So I'm trying to discuss that with the .NET team and the Visual Studio team to understand what we're doing wrong if we're doing something. But it's not just about Uno's doing anything here. Sometimes it's just having generators that takes up memory. And you can see here the compiler kind of takes time sometimes. Kind of takes memory sometimes. So yeah. So there you go. So Jose is asking, when you say mixed mode, could you talk more about that? Well, that's the profile AOT mode. That's what I was talking about here in the documentation. You can do profiled. No, not here. Okay. No. Okay, so the search is not working well. Let's search for here. Tooling, WebAssembly, Bootstrapper. So when we say mixed mode, it means mixed AOT and interpreter. So that's that specific mode here. And it's only for WebAssembly. There's no, well, actually, it's also present on iOS and Android, but it's less used in release mode. Okay, so we've built again. Now let's see when we do clear, if we actually do clear the content, if the memory goes away. It should, but we'll see. Okay, so I have an item here. So it does clear. Should probably be removing that one. It's not useful. So in Uno, we have a set of helpers for unit tests, for runtime tests that do memory leak testing, and that means that we're going to have to add a new test would actually add something in the UI tree to determine if we're having something that doesn't work. So let's go and figure this out. So if we add an item. So we have a capacity of 8. It's supposed to be empty because we didn't add anything. So it's empty. And then if we remove the item, we have one item in the list, a raw view buffer, which contains one line. And then if I clear, what does something else? I don't know. Okay, so it went out because it's optimized. But if I do add again, do I have something in my array? I would hope not. Come on. Oh, so probably it's not the right one. Where am I going? Okay, so where's the file coming from? So it's the right file, but for some reason it's not using the right binary. So let me see. Did I rebuild the whole thing properly? That could be very well that I did not use the right one. So let's try again. So the reason for this is that the binaries that are used by the app are not exactly the ones that are referenced by the compiler. There's a bit of swapping that happens at the end. So Visual Studio does not detect always that we've changed the binaries. So that's why we may sometimes need to do something about it. But by the looks of it, either there's an exception, that could be. Let's see. I wonder if there's an exception. No, there's no exception, but for some reason it just gets out and it doesn't do anything. So I wonder, maybe we don't have the right binary. So let's try to see if we have the right content. So to troubleshoot this, it's fairly easy. We just go to the output folder and try to get to the binaries that are actually executed by the app. Ah, I see. We're in .NET 6. That's why. Okay, so let's go to .NET 7. So we're .NET 6. So the app is built with .NET 6, and the reason it doesn't work is that I chose to go with .NET 7 when I built the app here. So you can see here that the generated target framework for the binaries is .NET 7. So I'm overriding the NuGet cache using .NET 6, .NET 7, and the app is using .NET 6, so it doesn't take the right version. Okay, so I should be good this time. Let's try again. So you're talking about, which test are you talking about, Duff? Okay, so do I get to do go inside? Yes, I do go inside. Okay, so that's the right code. It's the code that overridden that I had overridden. So yeah, there's probably it is that as well. Okay, so let's see if I add items or remove items, clear. If I do a GC, ooh, where am I? Where's my arrow? Nowhere. Okay, so okay, clear lines. And if I do GC, it doesn't go down yet. Okay, so there's probably something else that's keeping the memory up, because we can see that we still have a few things here. But let's see if we go to the clear again. Do we really have the content? Less content. So clear lines, that was not the right one. Okay, so that's the scrap layout. So if I remove, so I just should have less content in buffer. Oh, that's correct. Okay, so that means that we have another leak somewhere, because the memory is not going down. The GC should have helped, but for some reason it's not doing anything. So I add memory like this and I remove. Yeah, definitely not going down. So we have another leak, and that's going to be for next week, because we're out of time. So that was interesting. So we know that we have at least one bug with double-ended queue, which is a problem. So that one is probably going to be fixed very soon. But it looks like we have another problem somewhere that makes the memory still leaking. So we're going to figure this one out next time. And just one question. So somehow Reload works way better with VS Code than Visual Studio. Yeah, and yeah, it's something that we're working on. So stay tuned. So that's it. So I hope it was interesting. I enjoyed that session. Lots of interactions, and thank you everyone for staying there, and thank you for everyone for whom it was late. So that was nice. So until next week, happy coding, and bye for now.